Yeah, we're looking at 1 after 10, so I'm thinking let's go get started. So let's just say, hey, thank you everyone for joining us today on this, I don't know where it is where you are, but here it is a cloudy and cold Friday morning. So looks like we have a good crew showing up. And yeah, like I said, let's get started. We have a very full agenda today. So I know many of you have been here before, but for those who haven't, my name is Allison Thompson. I'm a Forest Health Watershed Coordinator here at the South Yuba River Citizens League. And I also split my time with Camptonville Community Partnership, as I'm sure many of you can relate to, you know, hands in many baskets. So our Forest Health team here at Circle, who I'll introduce in just a minute, has organized this group, the Yuba Forest Network, to help connect resources and increase networking opportunities among Forest Health stakeholders, which is you, which is why you're here, right? So across the Yuba River watershed. And we are doing this with the ultimate goal of supporting your current projects and developing new larger cross-boundary forest health projects to really reach that pace and scale of restoration that we're all working toward. So I think I am screen sharing, right? You can see my cute little slides there. Good. So first off, we'll just kick it off with some introductions. If you are logged into the Zoom platform, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat box. Please share your name, your organization or agency, or who you're representing today, and then answer one question for us, and that is, how do you enjoy the Yuba River and its forests? I'm thinking, you know, hobbies or your favorite way to recreate, or you know, but besides work, do you go out there and hike? Do you paint? Do you whitewater raft? Do you fly kites? How do you enjoy our watershed? What does that mean to you? So you can put that in the chat, and then while you are all working on that, we will introduce the rest of our team here. We have Andrew Salmon. Andrew, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Good morning, everyone. Andrew Salmon, Forest Conservation Program Manager here at Circle. Really excited. Allison's put together a great agenda today for us, and we're also really excited to introduce Mary McDonnell, who is our Forest Conservation Coordinator. Mary has been with Circle for the last year as an AmeriCorps member, and we promoted her after an amazing year. And so she'll be working with this group a little bit more and helping Allison out, which is great. And so some added capacity. Mary, would you like to say a few words as well?
Sure, thanks Andrew, that was flattering. I'm just really happy to be here, excited to start working more in forest health and join this awesome team. So nice to meet you all.
Great, and then we also couldn't do any of this without the unending support of Circle's Executive Director, Melinda Booth, who I believe will be joining us today. And great, well, I see plenty of chat box introductions going on. Do we have anyone on the phone calling in? You can go ahead and introduce yourself now if you're there. And you can try *6 if you're having trouble unmuting. Well, maybe no one's on the phone. That's great. Everyone's logged in and has great internet today. That's exciting. All right, well, we're so glad that all of you could join us today. Thanks so much for being here, and I think it is time to get on with the program. So I sent out the agenda earlier this week, but first up today, we have a team here who they are studying workforce capacity. We have Sarah Nelson. She is a postdoctoral researcher in the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs at the University of British Columbia. Patrick Bigger is an assistant professor of economic geography at Lancaster University in the UK. And Micah Elias, who is a PhD student in the Energy and Resources Group at UC Berkeley. So Sarah, Patrick, and Micah are developing a regional workforce survey to assess current capacity and needs across the Sierras for the forest restoration and forest management workforce. They're going to present their plan today, and I believe are also looking for your feedback. And then I will let them tell you the rest. So Sarah, Patrick, Micah, thanks so much for being here today. Go ahead and take it away. Let me stop sharing my screen. There you go.
Thank you, Allison, and thanks everybody for giving us some of your time today. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick. Can you all see that? Those slides okay? Let's see, try not to get this window in the way. So we're here, as Allison said, to introduce a study that we are developing of workforce trends, capacity, and needs related to forest restoration in the area of the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative. And to ask,
Sarah,
yeah.
we're not seeing your slides.
Oh, you're not? Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, no problem.
I think I clicked it and then didn't actually, let's see, yes. Is that better?
Yes, there you go.
Perfect. Okay.
Great.
So yes, this study is focused on the TCSI area, and we would love to have some feedback from you and get a sense of whether folks might be interested in being a bit more involved in guiding the study. So just to give you a small bit of background, Patrick and I have been researching the development of the Forest Resilience Bond, currently being piloted by Blue Forest Conservation in the Yuba project since 2018. And we've met, I think, several of you on this call in our research on that. Micah has been, was an intern with Blue Forest last year and has been doing this year, and has been doing his PhD on valuing ecosystem services and social benefits of holistic agricultural systems and forest restoration. And so one thing that has come up for all of us in our work is an interest in better understanding how restoration work can actually impact local economies and the workforce related challenges to increasing pace and scale. So pardon me while I navigate Google Slides, which I'm not super familiar with. So I'm going to give you a brief intro of why we're focused on the TCSI area, the goals and research questions and methods that we're using. And then we'd love, we may have a couple minutes to get some feedback or answer some questions. And we're especially interested in whether there are individuals or organizations who may find value in this study and would want to contribute a bit more to actually guiding the study design by joining a core group or a steering committee or something on that. So the TCSI, as folks here know, and we'll hear much more about, I guess, after we're talking as well, is a partnership of state, federal, and non-governmental partners aiming to enhance forest resilience across a 2.4 million acre landscape, so quite a large area. And this was part of our reason for choosing this scale as the study, as the scale of our study. It encompasses multiple river basins, 5 national forests, a diverse array of projects and funding arrangements and ongoing collaborations that we felt would give us a real diversity in the kinds of things that we're able to look at. So our hope is that by covering this broad area, the data in this study will be useful beyond the TCSI itself to other groups in this broad reach. But we are also, we've had a lot of discussions about sort of the scale at which we're working, so we're very open to feedback on that as well. If folks think there's areas that we may be missing, et cetera. Based on, I can talk more about this if folks are interested, but based on the kind of data that we have, we'll be essentially looking at work that has been done in all of the national forests intersecting the TCSI and the counties immediately surrounding that area. So it will be a bit broader than that outline itself. So this study is really based on the premise that the pace and scale of forest restoration relies on sufficient workforce capacity to carry out that work. And restoration also promises economic benefits to local communities, including direct jobs and indirect economic uplift. But the ways that those flows are actually distributed and how much of those benefits are actually captured locally is a complex question. So our aim is to better understand these relationships between workforce capacity, pace and scale, and the local economic benefit of restoration. So for instance, is there sufficient capacity to meet public agency goals regarding the pace and scale of restoration? How can economic benefits of restoration be captured most effectively locally? And what are local contractors' capacity building needs to actually be able to get more of that work? So this study aims to understand these relationships in this area with the following goals: to gain a clear understanding of workforce characteristics and capacities in the TCSI region, to ascertain capacity building needs to meet restoration goals, to identify and explain workforce and funding related limitations to increasing the pace and scale of restoration work, to assess where public funding for restoration work is flowing on public and private lands, and to determine how to increase local capture of those benefits, especially by marginalized and vulnerable communities, and to create policymaker and stakeholder actionable information on the state of forest restoration work in the TCSI area. So I'll talk a bit through our research questions. I probably won't have time to talk in detail about each question, but essentially there is a backward-looking and forward-looking component to this study. So the backward-looking component is aiming to understand the trends in restoration funding and restoration work in this area by looking at the data from publicly available for restoration contracting on public and private lands. I'll talk a bit more about our data sources if folks are interested over the past at least 10 years, but we may also decide to capture more in order to understand those trends. And then a forward-looking component that wants to understand local workforce capacity and needs, and workforce and funding related barriers to scaling restoration work and the capture of the local capture of economic benefits. So our methods really involve a whole lot of publicly available data analysis, a survey of contractors in the region, local contractors in the region, and interviews with some of those contractors and contracting and implementation agencies that can get in more depth about some of these issues. So in terms of understanding the trends in restoration funding, we are interested in what public and private entities are funding restoration work, how those funding structures may be changing, and how funding structures may impact the ability of contractors to bid or to win bids, et cetera. What specific treatments are most costly and most difficult to fund. I'm going to just talk through these questions a bit quickly in the interest of time. Trends in restoration work, what contractors have worked on public and private lands in the study area, how is that work distributed among local and non-local contractors, so how much of that work is flowing to local contractors versus contractors from elsewhere in the state or out of state, what are the demographics of ownership of those companies, et cetera. And that is data that we have very good access to on public lands and some access to on private lands as well. What kinds of restoration work have been performed? Where is most of the money going towards what kinds of things? And are local crews getting a proportional number of those projects, et cetera? What are those trends in local and non-local contracting by land tenure, work type, and funding arrangement? In terms of the more forward-looking component, we're aiming to understand what is the experience of local crews with contracting on public and private lands. Do certain kinds of companies have an easier time working on getting contracts on private lands? Are they doing different kinds of work in public and private lands? What is the capacity of local crews for various types of restoration work, and where are their capacity building needs? So this is where we're really going to be working with survey and interviews with contractors to get a bit more in depth on those issues. And then in terms of understanding the barriers to both increasing pace and scale and capturing those benefits locally, what, if any, barriers exist to local crews winning Forest Service contracts in particular. And then what are the state and federal goals for forest restoration in the TCSI area? And how does this compare to local workforce capacity? So this is where we're going to be looking at the NEPA ready projects that are within the TCSI area, CAL FIRE restoration targets, and trying to understand whether the capacity, the workforce capacity, how the workforce capacity in this area maps on to those goals. And then what can be done to increase the local capture of economic benefits from restoration, particularly among underserved communities and minority-owned businesses. So I realize that might be a lot to take in, and I've talked through a lot of this fairly quickly, but we are really interested in any feedback you might have on what might be the most or least interesting topics or questions about this, what feels relevant or not. We're working right now to figure out what our definition of local should be, whether that includes counties within and adjacent to the TCSI or a broader area. And we, of course, are also interested in any additional data sources that you might suggest. We can talk about that more if folks are interested, but our main question today is if there are individuals or organizations, as I mentioned at the beginning, who might be especially interested in helping to guide something like this. We would be very interested in hearing more from you and getting some more in-depth feedback. Our primary aim is that this will produce some useful information to the folks actually trying to do this work in the area. So we want to make sure that it's going to do that. So thanks so much. And yeah, happy to field any questions.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great. We do have a few more minutes for questions. So does anyone have questions? Feedback?
I have one. This is Joanna. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Hi. First of all, I think this is really interesting. I'm really excited about it. And I don't know about being a for sure a steering committee member, but you can put my name down as somebody interested, and maybe as you develop that committee, somebody from the agency would probably sit in, either myself or somebody else. But I was interested in if you knew about sort of a new program with CAL FIRE. I think it's called the Wood Products Innovations and Bioenergy Program. That I think this is probably a funding source rather than maybe necessarily a partner, but I think it's brand new and sort of in development, but it's something to just make sure you're tracking as a possible way to jumpstart some of this work. And then the other item I wanted to ask was, had you considered the development of another sort of impact bond that maybe was an environmental social impact bond that could include it, maybe piloting some of these ideas in certain areas, and then have, you know, the pay structure and monetization directly include social impact and economic measures in the math. I'm really interested in how we could develop more of those, particularly in Yuba County. So it was just an idea to add into sort of your direct thinking.
Cool. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I'm not aware of that CAL FIRE program, but Micah, maybe, are you aware of that at all?
Yeah, I've seen some of the emails come out. That's a great idea, Joanna. Maybe we should dig into that. And even though that is, I think, like explicitly a grant source, I'm sure that there's somebody on CAL FIRE who's tied to that. That would be really helpful to have a conversation with.
Yeah.
So Justin, I know Justin Britton is in, I don't know if any of you know him. He's I think staffer level. That he actually was working with us on our Healthy Forest grant, and I know he's moving to that program. And I believe a fellow named John McCarthy is also new to CAL FIRE, also in that program. So if any of you have professional links to those two people, I have Justin's contact details if you need them.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that definitely digging into getting some contacts with CAL FIRE is kind of our next step here. We've been mostly focusing on the Forest Service data, which is, of course, you know, very well available, very, very public. But so that would be really helpful. I think we'd love to follow up about that. And then in terms of the social impact bond, I guess I should say that we're not directly connected to Blue Forest Conservation at all, but we have, been researching them for the last couple years. So, and we have actually talked with them about a social impact bond kind of casually. And I know that they've expressed some interest in it. So I don't know what their plans are there, but that would be, I think, part of what our interest is in figuring out really what the sort of key messages coming out of this might be, and maybe informing some idea like that, could be part of that as well.
Great.
This is Chris Friedel with the Yuba Watershed Institute, and I just suggest there is some work happening on other federal land in the TCSI area. Just I would suggest looking at BLM land as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point.
Hi, Sarah. This is Randy. A couple of things, and to those that I got a text chat from, I can't make my system work, so I'm challenged on all of this technical. So I'll tell you hi. Good to see you, and good to be here. Unfortunately, I've got kind of an urgent that I need to run. But one of the things I wanted to cover is the workforce scenario. Are you working with any of the one-stops or grant programs out of the state for job placement training?
We're not working with them, but we were going to explore a few different avenues for locating contractors to get in touch with, to survey and to request interviews with. So I think that might be one great source for that. But if you have ideas or suggestions about other ways to work with them, or to maybe more directly get some feedback from them on this, that might be a great idea actually as well.
Yeah, I can tell you I work pretty close. I'm the chairman of the North Central County Consortium.
Okay.
And it's a weekly conversation I have with the director that there's a lifetime of work to be done in the foothills. So how do we gear up for that? And I need their support to do that. And she's constantly looking for opportunities in the state. So if you want to get a hold of Cindy Newton, and she's in Yuba City with NCCC, tell her that we've talked, and you might want to have that discussion.
That's great. That's a great suggestion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that is a source that is overlooked, but we really need to focus. The other one is the CCC. Have you talked with them about opportunities in this area?
No, we haven't. We've kind of been getting our design together at this point, and we haven't made a lot of those contacts yet. So that's also
You'll
great.
put them on your list. They're actually based out of Chico. I've had discussion about the opportunity of creating a training ground here in Yuba County, which is kind of the center to your whole map. I would love to see that. They had some suggestions of how to start working in that direction. So again, if you've got the number, or get back with me, and I'll get you in contact with, but I think there's an opportunity that we could use them and coordinate with them to have a camp right in the center of that hub.
Awesome.
Which is long-term. This is, again, a long-term project that really needs that consistent massaging to get it accomplished.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great suggestion. Thank you so much, Randy.
Okay. All right, I hate to run, but I'm going to have to jump off. Sorry, the stuff hits my desk unexpectedly, but appreciate your effort. And Joanne, let me know how the meeting goes. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, and these are great questions, great discussion. Unfortunately, we have to move on just for the sake of time, but thank you again, Sarah, Patrick, Micah. If you guys are staying on the meeting, folks can certainly keep asking questions in the chat box and get a hold of you for feedback, and if they're interested in joining your steering committee. So yeah, let's keep the conversation going for sure.
Perfect. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we'll send our contact info at the end as well. So thanks.
Great. Thank you. Great. So moving on, it is now my pleasure to introduce Pat Manley with the U.S. Forest Service Pacific Southwest Research Station. Pat and her colleagues have been working for many years to develop a framework for promoting socio-ecological resilience across forested landscapes in the Sierra Nevada. And this topic actually came up in our strategy development subgroup over the past couple months as we discussed developing a definition of forest health specifically for the Yuba watershed as part of a shared strategy and vision that can help guide forest health work in the region. As part of the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative, or TCSI, the resilience pillar framework that Pat and her colleagues have developed is something that the strategy subgroup has suggested that we, as the Yuba Forest Network, utilize or align ourselves with as we develop a regional forest health strategy, which is one of the goals of this group here. So without further ado, I will let Pat take it from here. Just some quick logistics. We will have about 5 minutes at the end of her presentation for immediate burning questions. And then we will be splitting back into smaller breakout groups like we usually do if you've been here before. And then we'll come back to the main group to discuss more, and we'll have Pat answer any other questions or thoughts that come up in your small groups. So feel free to type any questions in the chat box or save them till the end, and we will have plenty of time to discuss. And with that, Pat Manley, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. So I'm looking forward to getting to know your group a little bit and sharing what we've been developing on behalf of the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative, as Sarah and her colleagues were just speaking of. But you know, one of the things that the objectives of the TCSI initiative, or that group, the stakeholder group, is to really approach problems in a way that helps lift everyone up, provide approaches and tools that everyone can use across the Sierra Nevada and across the state. So, so this is one of those products, and so I'm glad that it has sparked some interest. Hopefully it will be useful to you all. And so I'm just going to take a little bit of time to go over what it's about, and hopefully we'll leave, as Allison was saying, the majority of the time for discussion. I developed this with a lot of people, but I specifically want to make sure folks know about the Kristen Wilson with the Nature Conservancy and Nick Povak, also with PSW Research, put a lot of time and energy into this. So, and then some folks at the California Tahoe Conservancy, Forest Shaper in particular. So a lot of great folks helped pull this together, which is why it's as good as it is. It's not something I can lay claim to. Just I'm the messenger mostly. So the objective really, what spurred this this effort was that resilience is a focus, certainly for federal lands, but really across landscapes. The idea that we want these ecosystems to be able to handle whatever stressors come their way and continue to be the systems that they are. So and in so doing, provide the benefits that we're interested in and dependent upon from these systems. So it's really much more of a focus as time goes on, and in particularly as we understand that systems are stressed. So when we see pre-mortality, as we've seen in the Southern Sierra, and a lot of modeling is looked at the degree to which that is likely to sort of reach further north, and when might that happen, and beetle infestations and such. It's really something that, and then the fires of this year, of course, are even more evidence of that this is on our doorstep. It's not a future consideration. It's really, how are we going to handle this now, but into the future. So, but it's an attractive concept, but it can be really challenging. What does resilience mean? So that's part of what the objective is here for this framework, was to sort of tackle that. So we're trying to respond to some of these major stressors and the sort of unfavorable outcomes that we're seeing so far in terms of how our landscapes and our communities are actually being affected by various stressors in terms of fire and drought. You know, folks are coming together around landscapes just as your group has, which I think is just a perfect example, and also a really productive approach. Stakeholders are now a driving force across landscapes, and this push for pace and scale means we're tackling larger scales, larger landscapes, more complex landscapes, both socioculturally, but also and ecologically. So we know we need to sort of increase the pace and scale, but that means it sort of brings with it a fair bit of new territory that we need to tackle. A lot of the thinking, a lot of the research that we rely on to understand that maybe we're not, these forests and forested systems are not quite where they need to be resilient. Many of those are sort of focused at the stand scale. So it's really challenging to be thinking about, well, what's the vision at the landscape scale? Fewer trees per hectare or per acre, you know, that's something we can handle. That's a stand scale phenomenon, but we're really talking about large landscapes and what do those look like? And that's what makes this challenging, but also exciting and some new territory. So just a tiny bit about what resilience is about. So make sure I leave a little bit of time. You know, it can mean a lot of different things, but the very first bullet here, the capacity of an ecosystem to absorb disturbance and reorganize, meaning respond to that disturbance while undergoing change, but still retain the functions, structures, identity, and feedback. So there's a lot of jargon thrown in there. This is about as clean a definition as you get that has meaning to it, though. So you kind of unpack that a little bit, and that's what this framework helps us do. So a lot of stakeholder groups, and much like your group, you know, wrestles with that. It can take a lot of time. It can take a year or two. And I've worked with the Southfork of American, that stakeholder group, Lake Tahoe West stakeholder group, less directly, but still with North of Yuba stakeholder group. And it's something that everyone wrestles with, and it can take a lot of time. And it can get in the way of moving into the stage of having a vision for that landscape, which is really important and kind of critical for knowing how you want to move forward together. So something that everyone feels represents their part of the whole, and how do you do that? So hopefully this tool is helpful in that regard. That's certainly its objective. So one last thing about resilience is just that it's really about response. It's about how dynamic is a system and how does it behave when it's stressed by various things. I mean, our systems are stressed all the time. We have had droughts in the past. We have fluctuations in precipitation and temperature and various storm events, and but they're becoming more frequent, more intense, and more directional. And that's, of course, largely climate driven. And really what we're looking at is this is a adaptive cycle from Holling and his colleagues. It's been around for a while, but I think what we're seeing is that we're sort of at that trigger point, that left-hand box. And what that really means is that we're undergoing a period of rapid change. So that makes it a little bit harder. If we were back on this, in the middle of that green part of the loop, and we're just kind of chugged along and things were changing slowly and we needed to kind of understand what we wanted, I think that this wouldn't be as challenging, but we're seeing now rapid change in systems. And so it's even more important for us to have a common vision, to have a well-informed set of target desired conditions, and be able to then act on those in a relatively, short period of time. And we're sort of by most measures and experts, we have a 10 to 20 year time frame. If we want to change sort of the direction that things are headed now in terms of forested systems. We do have an analysis of the TCSI landscape that I can maybe talk a little bit during the discussion. We have some early results in terms of our future modeling that kind of help verify and put a point on this, 10 to 20 year time frame for action. So the framework for resilience is really quite simple. We've said, well, what's really important is one of the sort of tenets of it is that the solutions and really the durability of our communities and our forested systems are really in a function of their interdependence. So we want to make sure to both represent and account for the high degree of interdependence between forest systems, ecological systems or environmental systems, and social cultural systems, that they really are highly interconnected, and you can't really achieve progress on one without progress on the other, in a sense. So we identified these 10, what we call 10 pillars of resilience. They're components of these systems along this gradient from environmental to social, essentially. So you see them there. They're really broad landscape outcomes. So they say, like, it creates a very generic vision for an outcome that could be applied to any landscape. And then based on the specific landscape, you can take that particular outcome and customize it for your landscape. So I think that this would be very applicable to the Yuba watershed. And I'm going to provide some examples of how we've done this, how it's sort of structured, and then we can come back to what might be useful for you. So these are the descriptions of the outcome statements. They're very broad. They're very sort of aspirational in nature, and they are not spatially explicit to any particular place. But you can imagine that then, so you can take, and I'm just going to walk through 4 of the pillars as examples. I won't walk you through all of them, but hopefully you'll get the idea of how they're structured, and then the other 6 are basically the same way. So these are the outcome statements, and those can then be, you can bring those into greater definition for any particular location. This is just to the point that among these 10 pillars, they're highly interdependent. So the outcome of any one of these is quite a bit dependent upon the outcome of all of them. Some are more interconnected than others, and so this is just a really quick look at that. One could quantify this as in a food web, or we haven't done that yet, but we're talking about it. But in this case, I just sort of put together these arrows to show the degree to which, when we have this lens of a forested landscape and these pillars of resilience, these aspects of them or components of them that drive conditions across the board, you can see that some are much more connected than others. Some are really, their condition drives the conditions of other things, and vice versa. Others are really kind of integrators. They are a reflection of the condition of other conditions in the other pillars. So this just helps us understand a little bit about the dynamics. The main take home is that they're highly interdependent, but for instance, if you, I'll talk about the 2 ends of the spectrum. The drivers are the brown boxes. So these are things, if something happens in one of these brown boxes, it's going to have reverberations across the board. What happens with forest resilience will affect fire, it'll affect air quality, it'll affect fire adapted communities, et cetera. There are strings that attach to just about every other pillar. And on the other end of the spectrum, fire adapted communities, for instance, that is one that is very much affected by other factors, but the fire adapted communities themselves aren't necessarily going to change fire resilience or forest resilience or carbon sequestration or biodiversity per se. So, but it's all an important integrated aspect of all of these pillars. So within each of those pillars, then what do we do with them? So we've broken those down into the component parts. I called them elements. And so for every single pillar, there are 3 to 4, sometimes 2 to 4 elements. And these really span the range of things that one might want or need to know about forest resilience that's relevant to resilience. So this is the whole set. And then within each one of those, there are various metrics of those conditions. So one of the things that's tricky about resilience is because it's a behavior, because it's a response, you don't really know if you have it until you look in the rearview mirror. Otherwise, in other words, it's a retrospective analysis to understand if the system's resilient or not. You know, when you have a stressor come along, and you know, a lot of our stand-based analyses of resilience, for instance, are when you've treated a stand to reduce fuels on one part of the landscape and you haven't in the other, a big fire comes through and you say, wow, look, the one that was treated has a lot less mortality. It seemed to fare better through that fire than the ones that were not treated. It had higher fuels, we had higher mortality. But we really don't know how resilient they're going to be. We've even done that with beetle mortality and drought mortality in areas that have been treated and untreated. But it's really tough to get at. So one of the things that's really important to keep an eye on, and I'm just saying this now so you can kind of train your mind through the course of the rest of this, is these metrics of conditions are just that. They're conditions that we believe will confer resilience. They're not measures of resilience, but they are things that we think will affect resilience. So within every single one of these elements, there are measures that we say, like, these are things we, you know, when we look in the review mirror in terms of systems and how they're responding, these are things that make a difference in terms of how well these systems will respond or fare when they are disturbed. So that's just something to keep in mind. So these, if for any one of these elements, what might those metrics be? Now this is where, for any given landscape or any given project even within a landscape, you could come up with these metrics that work for you. So these are just examples. They aren't the metrics. There's not a set of metrics, but these are metrics that are pretty commonly useful and relative to, relevant, I should say, to resilience. Some of these, you know, you would definitely include in just about any forested landscape, but there's a lot of flexibility in these metrics, both what they are, how you measure them, what data you use to describe them. And they also then become the things that one would probably remeasure over time, and they therefore become the factors that one measures success by over time or through monitoring, for instance. So just really, these are the four pillars again that I'm just going to keep bringing through this process. So we have these four elements in forest resilience: structure, composition, and disturbance. And within each one of those, we have, you know, one or more metrics. And another kind of interesting thing about this, I think, is that just as the earlier talk Sarah and colleagues brought in, those are metrics that we're really excited about for TCSI, but we don't have them yet. So we're doing an assessment now without, you know, with a certain set of metrics, but you can keep building on your understanding of the system and your vision for the future through these metrics over time. So you don't have to have them all figured out, you know, right away. You can kind of build a better and better notion of what it is you're looking for, what a good system might, you know, or the kind of system that has the kind of resilience you're looking for. That can get better and better and richer over time. So I think that sometimes folks get a little discouraged or might say, like, well, we only have one metric for structure. We can't, you know, that's not sufficient. Well, it's a good place to start. It's better than not having a measure for structure, and then build on that over time. So these are all actual metrics that we're using for the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative. Oops. Okay. So just one topic, one thing on regional landscapes, so such as the Yuba watershed. I think it's a great scale to work at. In fact, it's an essential scale to work. You can't really, you know, we talk about, we sort of think a lot at the stand scale. That's not a scale one can accomplish socio-ecological resilience, right? You know, you can't do it just on a forest stand, because there's all kinds of factors that make it either possible or impossible or hard or easy to actually achieve the conditions and maintain those conditions over time. If you need to manage it, reduce the fuels, you need to prescribe fire, that just touches a whole array of things around that circle, right? We need to have fire adaptive communities and communities that are supportive of efforts, whether it's fire or other factors that might create some inconvenience, but also, you know, folks are lined up behind the bigger idea in terms of what is they want to accomplish for their landscape, for their watershed. That's just one simple example, but having the workforce, being able to process the material, or all kinds of things that sort of come into play that make it either possible or really, really difficult to achieve desired, you know, target conditions and maintain them over time. So these larger landscapes, multi-jurisdictional, you know, urban to wildland, or you know, all that. That's just sort of a critical component, because we know through a lot of things we saw the last couple of years, you know, that the wildland affects urban, affects all kinds of infrastructure, and vice versa. The more interspersed we have, you know, the WUI, the wildland urban interface with wildland ecosystems, the more difficult, challenging, but also just it's a different context, a different set of challenges than one where you have a really strong demarcation. You have a, you know, an urban environment, and then it's, you know, fully a wildland, whether it might be a wilderness or a boundary is a good example of that. So we need tools. So this is what we've done. Essentially, you know, it leads you to do an assessment of conditions. We need to set target conditions. That's the vision part of it. You can set target conditions at a whole landscape scale, and I think that's really important. Some things are really all about, like, how much old forest do we want? You know, what do we want the fires to look like across this landscape? So setting these visions at the whole landscape scale is really important, and then bringing those into a spatially explicit landscape mapping or landscape rendition, where you're comparing current conditions to your target conditions, whatever those might be. And I'll give you some examples of how we've done this. It'll be a little bit clearer, I think. But this spatially explicit understanding of current versus target conditions is really important, because that identifies where there's opportunity for change. And then that opportunity is something that, as a group, like your group, you can come together and say, wow, well, you know, where do these opportunities lay out across the landscape, across landscape jurisdictions, our land jurisdictions? Who has what, you know, how do they line up with your the individual priorities and capacities of the stakeholders? And then understand, well, where can progress be made by whom and in what way, and how do those add up? So I think that there's a lot of great discussion that can happen there once you have this spatially explicit understanding of where there's the opportunity for change, and then who has the capacity, motivation, and, you know, priority to act on that, and in what way and when. So decision support tools, the last point on this slide, are really important for this, really helpful, because there's a lot of information. It's a multivariate, what I like to call a multivariate problem and a multivariate solution. And oftentimes, you know, it's really helpful to have some tools to sort out all the different factors that are acting on what might be done where in a landscape and by whom. This is just a really quick, I'm almost done with the presentation. So, but this is we're building a blueprint for the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative landscape. And these are the 10 pillars. And this is just a quick, you know, look at a reminder of the 10 pillars and how we're going to be adding up across the whole landscape, and for any one place in that landscape, how we're doing for all of these pillars, and what are some of the, not so much management priority, but I would say management opportunity. We're not, prioritization is a whole nother process. I think, you know, maybe we'll get into that in the discussion. A lot of folks push for priority, you know, are saying, well, we really need to prioritize where we're going to go in the next year or two, or the next 10 years. Well, actually, the next 10 years, you need to go everywhere. So you can do like the super high risk right away. What are we going to do next year? That's a conversation. But if you spend a lot of time trying to prioritize, you're actually wasting time because you have to, you know, we're really in the, I mean, that may be a radical thing to say, but in the next 10 years, we're supposed to like touch almost every acre. That's what the goal is, to somehow make a difference on every single acre. So either we're reducing risk or we're improving the resilience of that over time. And I think, you know, that's a pretty tall order. I think everyone feels like that's just not possible, but I think spending a lot of time, like, oh, let's take the next 2 years to prioritize where to go. I think, no, what you really want to know is where are the resources that need to be protected, and what do we need to do to protect them? And then everything else, what's the formula for making them, putting them in a better condition, and who, where, and how do we get the resources to do that? And the actual order is a little less critical, and I think. So that's something to ponder. And I'm sure there's plenty of folks who would take exception to that. But anyway, so the last thing I just want to talk about is sort of how do you bring it all together? So, you know, obviously GIS capacity is really helpful and important, critical these days, really. What sort of data are available? So to characterize these metrics of condition and help one understand what you want those target conditions to be. There's a lot of things you can sort of roll into that. For TCSI, we've, you know, we don't have LiDAR for that entire landscape. I don't think you do either. So, you know, we've tried to develop some techniques that don't require LiDAR so that they can be used everywhere, anywhere. So we only use data that were available across every single acre, across any landscape in the entire state. So we use the data, Sylvia Terra data, which is a imputed FIA data that's been sort of modeled across the landscape. There's also now the California Forest Observatory, which is LiDAR data that's been modeled across the entire state of California. Those are two really great sources that everyone has access to. They're publicly available. They're basically, they're free. And then, you know, those have their limits, but based on that, then you can say, well, what can we characterize for all the elements of interest? That's just the vegetation data. You've got, you know, community data, ingress, egress, you know, routes, a whole array of things. But there's kind of thinking through these, what are the data sources? And then how do we want to bring them into a spatially explicit mapping system so that we can see how much we have of what we want and where is it? And then where are we falling short of our target objectives, and how are those objectives sort of playing out in terms of who has the ability to change what, when, and where. So really quick, oh my goodness, look at that time. I'm almost done. So this is just a quick, I'm just going to do a quick kind of visual here. How do we map these things for TCSI? We have this is one of the pillars. So the 4 pillars, I'm going to walk you through those. This is just one element, tree structure. And what we've done is we've calculated a reference condition was used as target sites that had frequent disturbance. We use that to help us understand what the target tree density would be for any one pixel in this landscape. These are 1 hectare pixels. So for the whole 2.4 million acre landscape, at the 1 hectare scale, this is a rendition. The dark is where the tree density is farthest from the target, and blue is where it's closest to the target. And you can see the this is both tree density and basal area. So this is a spatially explicit mapping of that set of conditions, and where we're in line with target and where we're not. Here's the second one that's to do with fire dynamics, just the extent of different large patches. So one is just the extent of high severity fire, and the other is where the large patches occur. And so again, you know, it's a modeling exercise. You have to make a lot of decisions about what constitutes a high intensity fire, et cetera. What's a probability that's meaningful for you? But then we map these out so you can see where these areas occur. Water security, this is a modeling exercise. It's based on current condition only. These are all current condition. But looking at how, you know, this map on the right, what's the vulnerability index today? Where are these sites most vulnerable based on a combination of site capacity, climatic water deficit, and tree density. And finally, fire adapted communities. This is within the WUI, where is there a high probability of high severity fire, or any probability of high severity fire. That's what this is. So that if we pull these together, and this is again just current conditions, not looking at the future and where future changes will occur, but just looking at current. You can roll these together. This is a very simple, equally weighted approach or perspective of how these things might look spatially. And you can see that the map on the right is where it's blue. There's opportunities for change that would improve multiple benefits across multiple pillars. This is where you can get into, you know, well, whose land is that? You know, what do they want to accomplish? How might we be able to, you know, get multiple benefits by helping each other? Where are some really important parts of the landscape that are at higher risk or have bigger impacts than others? I'm gonna skip this because I'm running a little bit late, it seems like, and I think that's it. So we'll stop there.
Great. Well, thank you, Pat. That's so much information. That's great. Yeah, we're a tiny bit behind, but we do have maybe 2 minutes for any quick burning questions, if anyone has any at the moment before we head to breakout groups.
Hi, I have a question, Pat. Thank you so much. This is Carrie Monahan. I'm with the Sierra Fund, and this was a really fabulous presentation, pulling together so many different and important metrics for measuring things that are hard to measure, like resiliency, and you articulated it all really beautifully and in a way that we can find ways to act on it. So I appreciate this so much. And then I'm going to poke one hole at it. And that one hole is around the fact that these watersheds are already very disturbed and that it's not just stand density that will allow us to measure their recovery. So I saw that you had water wetlands as a part of it, which allows us to integrate meadows into this picture. So I'm thinking holistic watershed resilience, and I know that you're calling it forest resilience. And my poke is, where do we put the mine scarred lands in this? Those hydraulic mine sites that are denuded and that continue to have massive sedimentation and pollution issues. They kind of fit into water quality, and yet they're their own landscape feature like wetlands would be. And there's activities that we could prioritize around these sites to ensure that they don't have these mass wasting events. And so could you speak to that unique history of this area and why this model, really might need some of that fine tuning because of the destruction of the gold rush here?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I only focused on those 4, so it may have seemed a little, biased, but I think the other 6 pillars really help sort of broaden it way out. I mean, we've got economic diversity, social well-being, wetland integrity, water security. And in water security, there's a whole range of things. There's quantity, quality, and then kind of storage and timing, essentially. So those are all factors that, so I think that, it's interesting. I think your example is a great example of where we aren't trying to sort of sort out what would you do about, let's say, a denuded landscape, but you'd say based on the outcomes, the desired outcomes at the landscape scale, what role do those play? Are they impediments to any of those objectives? And if so, in what way are those impediments? Are they opportunities, to either bolster some certain condition that's less it's underrepresented relative to the desired? But I think that, chances are, there's probably a potential opportunity for reforestation or revegetation, but maybe it's really more sort of containing the impact that those have on other aspects of the watershed, maybe. Sounds like the way you put it. And that then would be, what aspects of what are they contributing that's putting other things at risk? And then are there mitigation measures for that? So as opposed to having them be an element of the sort of outcome oriented, it's really sort of having the benefits are the outcomes, and then what are the stressors and other impacts acting on those, and how to manage those. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Pat.
I have a quick question just about the timing of publicly available data. Maybe you may have mentioned this, but we have your white paper or final report to the SNC, but a lot of the maps that you showed us are something different. So I'm just wondering, is there going to be another data product that's going to come out at some point soon?
Sure. Yeah. Well, our assessment is pretty much finalized. It's getting the final reviews completed by the core group and steering group for the TCSI. So those data layers are actually available now. Some of them are available now. The SNC is hosting them. We're going to be attempting to host them. So there are some of them already, and it just kind of depends on what it is you're looking for. Like there's let's say tree density data, but then there's departure. So we've actually calculated departure. So we have sort of those base data, original data layers. We have then derived data layers and interpreted data layers. So it kind of depends on what it is that you're looking for. And it's only within the TCSI landscape, which is only part of the Yuba watershed. So I don't know to what degree that would be helpful to you, but those data layers will be, like I said, some of them are already available. You can contact John Tannenberg at SNC, but or if you can just talk to me and I can forward it to Kristen and John to see, you know, what you might, you know, what might be useful to you. The assessment we have, I think, probably, you know, over a dozen data layers that have been pulled together, and then we're building the blueprint, and we'll have the first version of the blueprint available for release the middle of January. So in very short order, we'll have 15-meter resolution data for the entire TCSI landscape, where we have at least, I don't know, maybe 30 different data layers that are available. So that's all coming together fairly quickly. But I guess one last thing I'll say about data is that I think it would be really important for you all, or valuable anyway, to sort of to think about what your vision is for this landscape and what metrics really help you characterize that vision. It's pretty easy. It's easy to get lost in the data. There's lots of data available, and like I mentioned, those 2 data layers that are available for the whole state. So that's one step you could take right now. Is, you know, the California Forest Observatory data is available to everyone, and the Sylvia Terra data, if you all are interested, I could probably help facilitate access to that for your entire watershed as well. And then the question is, what do you want to do with that? Because it's a lot of data, gigabytes of data. So you can get your hands on it, but I think it'd be good to think about what do you want to do with it, and how do you make it meaningful for you. And then that will pull in a lot of other data sets as well that are important to you, that you want to even develop, like ingress, egress, really important one, for instance.
And I just want to point out, we do have publicly available LiDAR for most, if not all of the Yuba watershed. So that's just another added thing for us to consider.
Yeah, if you have LiDAR, I mean, the nice thing about the California Forest Observatory is that they use all publicly available LiDAR. So the estimates where there's LiDAR are not estimated. I mean, the values, I should say, where there's actually LiDAR are not estimated. The only place that they're modeled or estimated is where there's not publicly available LiDAR. So that's just something to consider in terms of a wall-to-wall coverage that makes it really easy to make inferences across all lands to the degree that you want.
Great. Well, in order to keep on our time here, I love the discussion here, but we're gonna take just a few minutes to go to some breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and can ask a few more questions here. But want to give folks a chance to get in small groups and really chat about what we've been hearing today. So yeah, let's move on to that. We do this every meeting, so most of you know the drill. Mary's getting those rooms set up right now. We'll do just 5 minutes today, since we are a little tight on time. But yeah, when you get to your breakout room, we'd love for you to turn on your video if you're able to. And then everyone just go ahead, go around, introduce yourself. We'd love for you to discuss anything that came up for you today during Pat's presentation. If you need it, we do have a prompt to get you started though. And that just is basically, how do you see this framework, this TCSI framework, or a framework like this applying to your work in forest health in the watershed? So Mary, how are we doing on the groups? Are we ready? All right, so let's just take 5 minutes. It should take you to your group and then take you right back in 5 minutes and have some little smaller time discussion. So see you in just a few minutes. Yeah, there's so much good information. It's hard to cram it all in to an hour and a half.
Okay, I want to start a petition of people who can sign something that goes to Zoom that says, in these breakout groups, we want a hold button. And we need to like finish the sentence.
Yeah. That'd be great. All right, it looks like folks are coming back now. I know, sorry we had to cut that so short. We're running tight on time, and we want to make sure we get you guys out of here at 11:30 if you need to go. So we do have probably 4 minutes we could spend for a few more questions for Pat, or any great discussion items that came up in your groups. If you'd like to bring them to the whole group, that would be great.
Yeah, Allison, this is Eric. So we didn't get to mention it in our group, but one thing, I was on a call on Wednesday with the Truckee Watershed Council, and they're doing the same sort of data collection and analysis that Pat just went over. A lot of the similar stuff. So it's kind of it's going on all across the Sierra. I think a lot of that same sort of analysis. It's pretty similar.
Hi, this is Carrie. I'll try and keep it really short, but it kind of loops back to Sarah's presentation and the pace and scale of how we get more done quickly, and the basic premise that we're going to have this need for more labor. I just want to point out that I think we have billions of dollars coming to the Sierra for forest health issues, and it could all get directed to rapid response rather than forest resiliency if we're not careful. And then the other component is how do you administer and contract those funds quickly? I think we're looking at the dozen or so groups right now on this call that can both write grants, administer grants, and create contracts in a timely manner. And so when we've brought millions of dollars to the region previously through, let's say, our IRWIMP, that has always been the limiting factor. Yes, there's lifetimes worth of work to be done, but if we don't have the ability to administer those funds in an efficient way, then we create a bottleneck. Not only that, but the way that like the Conservancy brings millions of dollars to our region is through competitive grant funding, which is by writing grants to do one individual project at a time. So we absolutely need, right? And then each one of those grants has an administrative component and then has a contracting component. And you're looking at some of the groups that can compete for those funds effectively and have received those and made great things happen as a result of the Conservancy being there. But if we're talking about how we actually increase the pace and scale, that's the kind of logistics we need to be talking about. It's statewide. To me, that's the problem.
I'm just going to jump in really quick and just to say, I think that that's the power of these regional landscapes, such as the Yuba watershed, that you come forward with that cohesive, vision that represents all the partners therein, and then bring that to the table. I mean, that's what TCSI's sort of goal is as well, to say we need to be operating at these large landscapes, which means we need to be proposing management across these large landscapes and over, multiple years at the 10 to 15 to 20 year time span. And that's the capacity, then seeking the capacity to do that. It's just a little different. It's just turning it around and saying, well, we can do it project by project, but we know that that's not going to get us there, as you described. It's like, well, what's the big vision? And then what's the ask that makes that possible? And then that brings, I think, some policy change. It starts to push policy changes in terms of how funding, what the ask is in terms of proposals and the ability to award those proposals and over what time frame. So, like all of the CCI money, everybody's asking for extensions. Why? Because it's really tough to get something done in 3 years. It doesn't mean you can't make progress, but it just means any specific action, it's tough to squeeze into a very short time frame. But if you have multiple actions and you get those all going at the same time, you can accomplish a lot in a 5 to 10 year time frame. So I think it's really pushing the envelope on what does it really mean to change the pace and scale. And it means that a lot of things, even the funding mechanism and the project planning and all of that has to go along with it.
All right. Well, for the sake of time, if we don't have anything else, any other burning questions, I want to thank you again so much, Pat, for being here. This is obviously a topic for a much larger discussion. I feel like everyone's really excited about it. So, yeah, for everyone out there, if this does pique your interest, certainly consider joining our little strategy subgroup. I think we might try to call on you, Pat, again, to kind of continue the discussion as we move along. So yeah, please do feel free
happy to help.
join that. Awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. So yeah, thank you again. Afraid we do have to move on. We have less than 15 minutes till we get you guys out of here. So because we are tight on time, we're going to cut down on our action item report out that we had on the agenda. We'll include more info on all of that in the meeting notes that we'll send out after the meeting. But I do want to give Mary a couple minutes to show the mapping platform she's been working on, because she's been putting a lot of work into that. So Mary, I will let you take it away. A couple minutes.
Thanks, Allison. And real quick before I start, I saw a request for the slides, Pat, if you can share those, if you're able to. Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Okay, yeah, so as you may remember, that the Yuba Forest Network, we're trying to make this stakeholder mapping project compiled of all these different projects that are taking place in the watershed and the county. And so I've been working on that. I'm still working on the interface, but I'm going to share with you a link, because it is at a stage that I'd really appreciate everyone's feedback if you're able to check it out. You can email me, and I'll also put my email. If you have concerns, comments, anything you think you can add to this. I'm going to share my screen now to show you where it's at the moment. Can everyone see that? Okay, thank you. So basically, you know, we have our watershed, we have our county, we have a little description. You're able to click particular parcels to learn more. So zoom in here. Well, for example, this is a project you all might be familiar with, but the Ponderosa Defense Zone. We have our project name, organization, collaborators, type, treatment, status, dates, and then for those that are available, you have a link so you can learn more. So each parcel will have this data, at least that's available. Not everyone has all that data for us, but the more data, the better. That's kind of what makes this useful. And again, when you're thinking about feedback for me, we really want this to be useful to you, right? So anything that helps us get there. And what else did I have to say? Yeah, project status. I can make more of these tabs if you're thinking like, I'd rather see like treatment type, or for example, some of the CAL FIRE data is really large. They have larger scale projects that I didn't include here because it was just getting cluttered. You couldn't see these smaller scale projects. So like, for example, the egress ingress project is not on here because it was just taking up so much space. And I want this to be more focused, kind of regional tool for you all to use. Anyway, so this is where it's at right now. This is by status. Oh, sorry, here you can look at, we have active, planned, and completed projects. A lot of the completed is the Forest Service project data that we have. And then you can also look at it by stakeholder. And once that loads, we have all the different stakeholders. And then you can also toggle, if you want to just look at one stakeholder versus another. But anyway, like I said, still working on it. Not going to make it go live quite yet, but I appreciate really any feedback you all have. So let me know. Thank you.
And Mary, you've done such a great job on this tool. And I just want to emphasize that we want this to be as user-friendly as possible, but also as useful as possible. And so, for example, Chris, you mentioned the data going public on TCSI. When that does become public, we could potentially host that just for user-friendly mapping. That would be ease of access for some of the different partners on this group who maybe don't have GIS work in-house necessarily. And so finding those ways, I think CAL FIRE also has a similar mapping program going right now, and we want to differentiate ourselves just so that it's useful to our region specifically. So we don't want to be duplicative, and Mary started something that I hope can really build out and will build out over the next couple months. So thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, for the question in the chat, these projects go back to 2005, but if you'd rather not see that far back, if you want to just see 5 years, I could add a filter, that sort of thing.
I've got a quick question. Is this a good time? Did you include areas that have been identified as priorities for treatment, like by CAL FIRE or by fire safe councils or like community wildfire protection plans or anything like that? Like one thing I think about is like, often we're writing grants where you have to figure out if your project fits into someone else's prioritization. It'd be awesome if we had a tool that we could just pull from and save a bunch of time when we're doing stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's all kind of mixed in, to be honest. The CAL FIRE prioritization projects, and then there's some projects from the Fire Safe Council that's been provided to us. And so I can make that more obvious and separate. I think that's really good. That's helpful to know.
And just to be clear, we don't have each county's CWPP included at this point in time. So we can try and get access to that. I know there are also different mapping platforms, such as 34 North for Yuba County, but we'd love to have a one-stop shop as well. So if anyone has connections to the Fire Safe Council and could help us there, that would be great. It's just been one where I know we have a lot of meetings going on in the watershed, and I know Jamie hasn't been able to attend as much as she would have liked. So if we do have that data available, or someone else could make that connection, that would be amazing for us.
I can. I'm planning to talk with her later next week. But yeah, thanks. Good job. It's a really good idea to have a community mapping tool, and appreciate you guys getting an actual product put together already.
Mary, this is really impressive. You put together a lot of information in a really sleek, elegant format, like well done. I'm thinking multiple benefit projects. I'm thinking of meadow restoration with forest health being more competitive than just one, right? And so I know we have a meadows clearinghouse, and you know it took them 10 years to make that database, and you did this in I don't know how much time, so yay. But could we add other features like that? And then, you know, I'm going to say it, we have a hydraulic mine inventory database as well. And if you can couple abandoned mine remediation with forest health and meadow restoration, now you're looking at a very competitive project bundle with multiple benefits. And then you can add things like all the other pieces we already, I guess, are thinking of, but ways to make things competitive. Prescribed fire, working with First Nations, protecting cultural resources. We need to layer these multi-benefit projects together. And then you're right, increase the scale as well. I'm giving all my ideas out to everyone, because it's got to take everybody to do it for it to make sense, and shoot them down if I'm going the wrong direction. But I think more is better here.
Awesome.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Carrie. So if anyone else has other feedback for Mary, yeah, please do reach out. Oh, Kaylin, do I see one?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in and sort of piggyback on what Jamie Irwin was just saying. I do think being able to see that the CWPP and CAL FIRE, and helping people understand projects that are either proposed or underway, like Ponderosa, because I feel like there's still a great deal of misunderstanding about the benefits of these large-scale fuel breaks and how they could protect communities. And you know, the interest in the county right now is to, you know, work, you know, try to build community education and support for these large-scale projects, especially when they cross and involve, you know, private landowners as well as public lands. And so Ponderosa is good, but I'm still surprised by how few people know about it and don't really understand and haven't ever dug through the CAL FIRE, you know, annual strategic plans. So to be able to have a layer that could just show us cleanly for Nevada County, you know, where projects are either underway or proposed, and how to, you know, I think that would then be, we could then draw on that when we're writing grants, or when we're also advocating for a, you know, a healthy, you know, fire resilient community, and get people to start, because everyone's so, you know, everyone's concerned about their own house, being able to see like, oh, you know, if we've done this work, or the work where, you know, Jones Fire or any other fire, like had we had this, we might have been able to protect Nevada City, or, you know, this Deer Creek project that's been out there for years. So I think just getting people to understand that, and especially also for East County, because they have very different fire terrain issues too, sort of understanding what's being proposed and planned there as well. But starting to sort of be able to think long-term and big picture, not just project by project, I think would really help the lay public understand where we're trying to go. And then of course, all of these layers that Carrie talked about, and the first presenter about trying to create a healthy economy out in this, I mean, that's going to be very exciting too, where there's jobs.
Caleb, it would be great to have your insight on the comms committee. Just throwing it at our subgroup, just throwing it out there. You're invited.
Great. Well, we are quickly coming up to 11:30, but I wanted to leave a few minutes for announcements that anyone might have for the group. We have actually lined up a couple folks today, so I want to make sure they have a chance to just talk real quick. Eric Sweet, are you still on the line?
Yep, I'm still here. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up that there is a large mapping effort that's going on with private industry, Forest Service, state parks, National Park Service, NIFWIF, Caltrans, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm leaving folks off here that I can't think of off the top of my head, but a huge consortium of landowners that are putting a map together of fuel reduction projects across the state. And that currently is not available to the public, but I'm told that it will soon be. And as soon as I get that information, I'll pass it along. I think that all that data can be incorporated in to these sorts of analyses for all these groups that are trying to do risk assessments and allocate monies to projects, to tie projects in across ownerships through watershed, across the watershed. So as soon as I get that information, I'll pass it along to Allison.
That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Eric. Any other announcements? I think, Chris, did you have something? Good.
Yeah, Steve Graydon, who many of you know, local prescribed fire consultant, he got the support of the Nature Conservancy to do a prescribed fire training exchange here in the Yuba watershed. Another one, he did a pilot one last year. And the Yuba Watershed Institute and the Yuba Forest Network were all kind of coordinating to create an event in the spring and April. And it's going to focus primarily on the Inumum Forest project up on the San Juan Ridge. And we will have space for about 15 participants from the local community. And obviously folks on this call or groups in this call are going to be prioritized. But it is a small group, so there's going to be an application process, and there's a smaller kind of subgroup that's planning it. And so, yeah, I think we just wanted to let the folks know that that's coming up, and it's going to be in April, so stay tuned.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Jamie, I think you had something also you wanted to.
Sure, just real quick, for also related to prescribed fire, the Yuba Bear Burn Cooperative group that several of us on here are involved with, we have an opportunity coming up. If anyone on here wants to get experience using prescribed fire, we have a burn scheduled for the first week of December over off of North Bloomfield Road near Nevada City. One of the landowner up there, Janaea Donaldson, was able to get some funding for a burn boss for the day of and a burn plan. And so we're waiting for a good weather window. We've had a site visit with CAL FIRE and have tentatively set the first week of December, but may have to be kind of a moving target depending on what kind of weather we get. But it rained last night, so to start. Anyway, so get in touch with me. It's Jamie, Jamie at sierraforestlegacy.org if you're interested in either participating in the burn or just observing, and I can send you more info. And then also we can cover this later, just why BBC, the burn co-op in general, but we finally got some money to support our prescribed fire efforts here in Nevada County. So we'll have at least a community burn trailer and some funding for burn planning to move prescribed fire on private lands forward. So psyched to share more about that later, but most immediate thing, if you want to participate in a burn, regardless of your experience, get in touch with me and we'll see whether it makes sense. And I think we're going to have to limit volunteers to a certain number, but there's probably room for plenty of you guys. That's it.
Great. Well, we're 2 minutes late. If anyone does need to run, I want to say thank you for being here. If you're able to stay a couple more minutes, I think we have 1 or 2 more announcements. I'd love for you to stick around. Jeff, we talked a little bit about.
Yeah, I was just going to share. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to share the Jones Fire mapping stuff that we've been working on. So just, really quickly, we've had some questions about this that we've been kind of on the side. So I'm Jeff Lutter from Sierra Streams Institute. Those of you who don't know, we lost our office in the Jones Fire. Those who aren't from the area, the Jones Fire burned just north of Nevada City. Kind of started in the north area of the burn scar here and made a run towards town through a bunch of private properties after it started on, we think, public land. And basically wanted to show some of the mapping efforts we've been working on, and then also talk about really quickly, we just got approved for funding from the Wildlife Conservation Board to work with the Jones Bar Firewise community, as well as some other private properties. That's the parcels listed here. Originally, actually, it was on forest management and fuels reduction prior to the burn, so kind of ironic timing that we then got the funding or received approval after the burn. And so a lot of it now, though, we're looking to use as an opportunity to look at lessons learned and see kind of what levels of fuel treatments were done on some of these private parcels before the fire, and then how that was associated with fire severity. So we've been mapping fire severity like you see here, and then that's where the Sierra Streams office was. And then looking at things like forest structure, just in terms of canopy cover. We're gonna get the LiDAR data and some of the forest observatory fuel structure data and put that in and basically say, how did prior forest structure influence burn severity, and then did treatments that were implemented on these private properties actually influence resulting burn severity, and then hopefully use that to then guide the management of these same properties moving forward and the properties that didn't burn in the Jones Fire. So it's just a really brief look at some of the things we're doing to say we're still looking for partners and funding to kind of continue this and expand out, get some more on the ground data, especially in the state parklands, and anyone who's interested in partnering with us on some of this Jones Fire severity mapping stuff, just email me, jeff@sierrastreamsinstitute.org.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Super important stuff. And part of the reason we asked Jeff to bring this up today is also maybe a bit of a teaser for our next meeting in February. We'll try to have Jeff give a little more in-depth presentation, and we'll also have CAL FIRE there to give a presentation on the South Yuba Rim fuel break and any other projects they have in the works around that area. And then some more follow-up on the Jones Fire specifically, and a larger discussion around potential projects in the South Yuba Canyon. So just want to put that plug out there. You can look forward to that for next time. And apologies for running over time. Are there any other announcements anyone has before we go? I see Julie. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one that can be very brief. So American Rivers, thank you. Sorry, I will be quick. American Rivers is national, and we have an annual campaign called Most Endangered Rivers, and it's an opportunity to really spotlight threats to rivers nationally. And this year we're thinking of highlighting the rivers of the Sierra Nevada due to the risk of fire. And really what it's used for is like a leveraging point to put pressure in some way to achieve an outcome. And so we're thinking of targeting, trying to increase funding for fuels work and restoration that would basically help get ahead of fire suppression. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm going to be working on our application for it, which is due next Friday. So I'm probably going to be reaching out to a few people to kind of like get up to speed on this topic just in generally. But if anyone has any specific input or wants to be sort of like a collaborating partner, it's a really powerful communications piece, and I want it to be robust. So I thought this group is a great group to just put a plug out there for. So feel free to reach out to me, or I may reach out to you.
Great, thanks, Julie. And yeah, like we've done in the past. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to throw in one more announcement, which is a call for, before we close here, is that if you see anyone who's not attending these meetings, please invite them. We've done a lot of stakeholder outreach on our part, but this meeting is as good as its attendees, and we're so grateful that you've all attended this month, and it's been great. But into the future, there are some critical players still throughout the watershed that we'd love to have on here. And again, we're trying not to be duplicative. And I think there's so much value, and Pat showed that today, in a regional strategy.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, and I was going to say where all these announcements we'll put in the meeting notes and put up on the website also. So blast that out to the whole group. Absolutely. So yeah, we are over time, but thank you everyone who was able to hang in here. I think this one was really informative and went well today. So thanks again. We look forward to moving some of these projects forward. Be sure to check out the website and use that, and let us know how that could be more useful, and the mapping platform as well. And definitely let us know if you want to join any subgroups. We'll have a little more information in the meeting notes. We were going to report out on that earlier, but alas, we ran out of time. So yeah, we will be in touch soon, and always feel free to reach out anytime. So with that, I will let you all go and enjoy the rest of your Friday, but thank you so much for being here. Have a great one.
Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.